Okay, well, we've now got a question and answer session. We've got a roving mic, so would people put their hands up and then say who they are and where they're from when asked to speak? We'll start with John.
John Lord, Chief Executive of Bolton at Home. It's probably 2 or 3 questions in this, but I'll be quick. The 3 rights that we talked about are very familiar to us from when we used to work in the Tories introduced a whole host of rights in the 80s and 90s, and they seem to like them a lot. But they always work for communities that are made up of lawyers, solicitors, community development officers. They very rarely work for people who wake up in the morning and have got far more pressing needs to look after, like getting food on the table, getting their kids into school, and not being truant and all the rest of it, which is more familiar territory for us. So I'm interested into what, if there's no guidance on this, or no resources, which there won't be, how do we avoid actually just widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots? Because my reading of some of these rights is that they will contribute to that. That's my first point. The second point is, I do think that there's loads of really good examples in this booklet, and we probably could have filled about 6 booklets if we sort of spent another 2 years collecting even more. I do think though that there is a sort of reality check in terms of the economy, and this relates to the point about the housing subsidy. We are likely, I think, in the next few years to see the end of housing subsidy. I think most people in housing believe that come 5 or 6 years we won't be seeing any housing subsidy around capital, and they're working on that basis in terms of new development. I do think that when we're looking at this, we have got to realise that the world is forever going to be different, massively different in terms of the money, the economy, the distribution of resources. And I think sometimes we do believe that in 3 or 4 years we're going to be back in the world as it was 3 years ago, and I just don't think we are. And I'd be interested in the panel's comments on what they do think the new world needs to look at and what those challenges are.
Okay, thank you. There's a hand at the front, we'll take that as well, and then we'll ask the panel.
Thanks. Kevin Curley from NAVCA, and it was really good to hear these inspiring stories. I especially enjoyed the video. I think my question is, what are the drivers of change in perhaps less ambitious and less community-oriented housing associations than those we've heard about tonight? When you're met with a sceptical response as a community organisation looking for a partnership, what are the sort of levers that might influence the people running the housing association to actually change their behaviour and become more interested in real partnerships of the sort we've heard about tonight?
Okay, well let's start with some of those. In terms of John's first point, Tom, do you want to start on that? It was hard not to see there was a slight political element to that.
Yeah, well, it's the question that everyone asks, and I think there are kind of 2 answers. I mean, the first is there is going to be some support on the rights that will be in place. I think you're involved. Are you involved in that discussion?
Certainly involved in the discussion.
Yeah, exactly. So it is an ongoing discussion. The rights have just hit the statute book. The second part of the answer, well, it's probably 3 parts, is there are plenty of examples where the type of initiative that we've been talking about today happen across a full range of communities. So I think it is too simplistic to say this is just an agenda for a sort of middle-class Tunbridge Wells community and not a more deprived community. And that flows into the whole thrust of my talk. Is it may not be that the original community initiative in all places will come from, as you say, people waking up in the morning and thinking they want to exercise a right. And there are 2 challenges for that. One is how we kind of talk about this stuff, because if you offer do you want to exercise a right to challenge, that is not a very appealing prospect. But if you translate it into the Lewisham story of the sort of practical problems, the things that people are bothered about, inspire much more activity. And the second dimension of that is then, well, what is the role of other, whether it's sort of community anchor organisations, whether it's housing associations, in helping promote that? Because in the end, I don't think anyone says that the ambition, the aspiration, or the examples talked about in the work here are wrong. It's how you can energise that. So that would be my response to the first question. I'll just pick up the second element. You know, is the world sort of headed for a disastrous slump? I have no greater insight than anyone else, but we did yesterday in the Times. We had Martin Wolf, the FT journalist, come along and present the data on this, and it is pretty grim, basically. I don't think that means we give up. I just think it is a backdrop to make this conversation a realistic one. I don't think anyone in government pretends that is not the case, and you know, in a way, there's not much that many of us in this room can do about that. It is the context in which we operate, and I just think it's worth acknowledging that.
Okay, thanks for that. Steve, do you want to say something on that issue? And I'm going to ask Caroline about a bit about the new reality as well.
Well, first of all, can these new rights be used by people in poor communities? I think the answer is yes, but only if certain things happen. In Scotland, the community right, a different version of the community right to buy was introduced about 8 years ago. It was very cumbersome, actually, and very difficult to use. But it was accompanied by very effective support for community groups and very well-managed financing. And the result of that was that nearly 2/3 of the Western Isles, for example, are now in community ownership, and many of them are not wealthy communities. So by itself it won't create that big change, but with the right kind of support it can do. We are at the moment running the asset transfer unit and also providing a neighbourhood planning support service. What happens with that sort of service beyond March, we don't yet know, but we do know that government is looking at that. And then just very quickly, what are the drivers of change? If I can mention that, with those housing associations that don't really get it, or maybe less ambitious, or have gone in a different direction, I would say money and power. Particularly if we're thinking about the really big national housing associations, the developing RSLs, who lost their community roots. The only thing that I can think that's going to change their direction is money and power. And so if we can strip the supply of money to them and make it available only on condition that they localise, maybe we can make a change.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Caroline, I wondered, in terms of that new reality, Tom's hinted at how grim it's going to be. I suppose from a kind of funder perspective, how are you gearing up for organisations working in that new reality?
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely the case that we have investees who are struggling at the moment, and our approach has been to try and explore with them whether it's underlying issues around their business model, it's the external climate, and then see what we can do to address those problems. So we take our responsibility as an investor quite carefully in this instance, and what we're not going to do is invest further money if we think it's good money after bad, but we've got a long-term relationship, so we are trying to work with them. I think that it's often not about extra money though, it's about the support we can put in alongside them, the money. And picking up on what Steve was saying, our experience around, we've done quite a lot of asset transfers which are sort of similar to much of the right to buy stuff, and actually we've done some really successful ones in deprived neighbourhoods, and a lot of that is about the drive from the individuals there. So it's not just about groups of professional people, it's about people wanting to change their neighbourhoods, and putting support in alongside that has been really successful.
Okay. And Mike, I don't know, in terms of you've worked with a housing provider, maybe your experience of those levers to influence that Kevin was asking about?
Well, it's kind of picking up on the point that Caroline just made about how do you get that level of ambition in areas of deprivation. And I think the development trust model of social enterprise, I mean, we're members of locality, you know, is a really interesting one. Because I think people will go for things where they've got that ambition. You know, when they see an opportunity, if they're used to practicing that, they can go for it. But what I wanted to talk about was the issue that arises where we've been talking about partnership, about increasing partnership work, and obviously local authorities play a large role within that. But where you've got a right to challenge, that talks about challenging a partner. So you're in this interesting position, you know, they're going to do X, I don't think that's in my interest, but if I challenge them, what's going to happen to that contract that might be down the road there, or, you know, that other asset that I'm actually far more interested in than this delivery of this particular bit of public service? And is it going to drive wedges between people that are partners? So you've got the local authority and the ALMO and the community organisation. We're not always going to have completely overlapping interests. And my fear is that we can damage long-term. If it gets to the point where we're having to use legal routes to challenge, it's going to damage long-term relationships that take years to build up.
Okay, thank you very much.